Okay, now for the diminutive program. I specifically was trying to be PC.
I may need one.
It's always nice to introduce one of our own, and Erick Slabaugh is one of them. Erick is the CEO and majority owner of Absco Solutions and has been with the company for more than 28 years. Absco Solutions focuses on life safety and security integration for campus environments. And Erick has enjoyed having both the Seattle Pacific University and Seattle University as clients for more than 25 years. He has extensive experience in securing educational facilities, being called upon by media at times of campus crisis, and used as a subject matter expert. So as our kids are going back to school, we thought it would be nice to have an expert talk about school security. Erick Slabaugh.
Do something I never do, wear my reading glasses. Well, first of all, by show of hands, how many of us in the audience today have a child or grandchild in the K through 12 system? Holy smokes, that is the majority of us. It's not a shock. Government census reports that there are 47.9 million U.S. students in the K through 12 system, and 1.4 million of those are here in Washington State. Americans, by and large, believe that school is the second safest place outside of the home for their kids to be. Some parents actually believe that school is safer than their own home for their kids to be. So there was an interesting report that was done by the State of Washington Department of Education recently, and in essence they took a secret shopper and they sent them out to schools to see how safe are our kids. One of the things that was interesting was that 97% of the schools had one or more entrances that you could enter the facility without being detected. There's another statistics that's a little more interesting and a little more frightening. The average time before that individual was detected was 9.43 minutes. 23% of the schools never knew that they had a visitor to their school at all. So the question is, how safe and secure are our schools? Homeland Security has a very real concern that our schools are at risk for terrorism. And they're concerned and developed a plan called the Primer to Design Safe Projects in Case of Terrorist Attacks and School Shootings. Their primary focus is around two things. One, improvised explosive devices, and the other, attack with arms, either ballistic or otherwise. For those of you who want some light reading that might keep you up, it's available on the internet. But basically it focuses on things like car bombs and how far should we move around our turnarounds at the school, so that they're farther away from the buildings. And what do we do in case of an actual armed attack? And we've seen armed attacks. Armed attacks don't have to take place because of terrorists. Unfortunately, they often take place because of the mentally unstable or because of domestic violence. So one of the challenges we face is that first and foremost, we need an honest assessment of what concerns we have in schools. And we've done that in a lot of areas that are easy to assess. The threats to our schools can come in a variety of forms. One is natural disaster, another is accidental, and the third is intentional. So, what threats do our kids face? Well, first of all, we all know that it starts from the second they leave home. Anybody else have a little bit of a concern after your children walk out the front door? I know I'm a little bit concerned. We have to worry about things like cyberbullying. We have to worry about things like just what's going on in the bus. And we've seen cameras be deployed in buses because we have a number of students and a very low adult population to supervise those kids. But what I'd like to do is really focus on what takes place in the actual building. So once the kids get to school, we talked about natural disasters. We've got storms, earthquakes, tornadoes, a variety of things. And we drill for a number of those things if they're applicable to our area of the country. We also have things like the accidental, the fire alarm or chemical spill. And again, we've developed systems, fire alarms, detection devices for those individual events, and we drill for those events. How many of us have participated in a fire drill at school? I think everybody, right? Or multiple, and does anybody remember getting under your desk in case of earthquake? Yeah, that was phenomenal practice. Our teachers all knew to tell us to go there. But one of the things that we're concerned about is the thing that's far more likely to happen. Domestic dispute, a parent who has a restraining order against them coming to the school and potentially being violent, predatory incidents, bullying, and school shootings. So the first thing we need to do is acknowledge that we need to deal with threats. And the challenge is that a lot of times when there's a media event, there's a lot of rush to respond and react to that event without putting together a comprehensive plan that would actually improve the likelihood of addressing a multitude of issues. Bullying can be addressed, and there's a couple of different ways to do that. Domestic violence can be addressed at the front door, and there's a couple of ways to do that. So a good strategic plan starts with asking the right questions and identifying the potential threats. On the intentional threats, we're talking about domestic dispute, bullying, active shooter, bombing, and things of that nature. Detection starts with situational awareness. It involves engaging the community so that we're aware if we have a student who's being bullied or we have instability before it goes too far. It involves getting to know the local police department and having a good relationship with them. It also involves things like video surveillance for situational awareness, deploying an intercom with a video camera at the front door and actually having the ability to lock the doors while school is in session. Obviously, we have that transition point where kids are going into the school and coming out of the school, but the school shouldn't be unlocked the rest of the day. We can put in things, sensors and things, to identify whether or not a door is propped open, which mitigates a lot of potential risk. We've done that at the universities and things like dormitories so that that door during move-in doesn't get left open indefinitely. So the next thing we need is notification, both internal, between the teachers and the administrators of an emergency, and external to the community. How are you going to be notified if there's an issue at your school? Last, we need to enable emergency response, both campus lockdown. Can we lock down the campus? Or unfortunately, like Virginia Tech, is there going to be a professor propping their door closed with their body while bullets are flying? Little things, and they don't have to be high tech, like putting a manual lock on a door can make all the difference. Seattle Pacific University, right after Virginia Tech, did that on all of their individual classroom doors, and it did make a difference. We need to be able to assert whether or not we can give remote video viewing to emergency responders. We need to deploy newer technologies, and we need to use an emergency response plan. One of the questions I have for many of the schools in our state is, do they have an emergency response plan? And unfortunately, far too many don't. And last, we need to have processes and procedures that are actually drilled so that when the emergency happens, we're not making it up on the fly. So a little bit of good news, bad news. The bad news first. After Seattle Pacific University's shooting happened, I was interviewed, and the thing that concerned me the most was the interviewer focused on one quote: "It is cost prohibitive for a school district to put all of the appropriate measures in place district-wide in a single year," as if that was an excuse not to do anything. The good news, and I'll give you one other bad news. Right after Seattle Pacific University happened, I had a meeting with one of the major universities in an inner city. They've spent tens of thousands of dollars on an access control system, but gleefully told me that they could not use it for lockdown because they did not have a concern that anything like a school shooting would ever take place at their facility. If you'd asked me before Seattle Pacific University shooting, I'd have told you that was the least likely place of any of the campuses I've worked in to see a school shooting. So, the good news. Architects and engineers and administrators and parents are starting to take a much more proactive view of how we should secure facilities, and that they shouldn't just be wide open. We shouldn't use just the honor system to determine whether or not the right person is in the facility with our kids. The second bit of good news is that the state has started to identify grant funds for the school districts. $7 million was released this last year, and there's more money coming in 2015 for specific security projects that the schools have applied for. Technology partners are seeking more and more cost-effective measures to deploy, such as the use of an everyday thing like an iPhone for campus lockdown and communication. This is all good news. The question is, what is your role in any of this? On your table, there's a flyer that has 10 questions that you ought to be able to ask your school administrators and teachers. If at your, yeah, and I'm sorry, I'll hold this up. If you go to your school and your teacher can't tell you what their role is, if there's an incident at the school, if there's a disgruntled parent or a school shooter or a bomb threat, then that means we probably don't have a plan. If they can't tell you how the building is going to be locked down or how you're going to get notified or what their communication plan is between the classrooms and the administrative staff, we probably have some challenges. The good news is if we identify those challenges early, we can start to address them. And it's going to take honest conversation and investment over a period of time to get to an effective plan. If you have any questions, I'll be here after the meeting. I welcome them, and I appreciate your time today.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.